They thought I didn't live there, thought the lake was just water, just space, just opportunity. They built 35 houses on land my family had owned for 72 years. They ignored the survey stakes, the permits, the deed. So I stopped arguing and let the lake remind them what was always hers. I'm not a loud man. I design drainage systems for a living, civil engineering, the unglamorous side of it. Soil reports, runoff coefficients, floodplain maps. I understand how water moves, and more importantly, how it waits. The lake behind my property has been in my family since 1951. My grandfather bought the surrounding acreage when it was mostly marsh and hardwood. He left a shoreline untouched. No docks, no retaining walls, just reeds, cypress, and a slow slope that allowed the water to breathe when storms rolled in. The deed is clear. The survey is precise. The lake bed and an additional 50 feet beyond the high water mark are mine. When the subdivision went up 3 years ago, I wasn't opposed to it. Development is part of growth. They graded the ridge on the opposite side and built large, angular homes with stone facades and ornamental shutters, clean lines, identical mailboxes. Then the HOA formed. Her name was Linda Carver, HOA president, early 60s, crisp haircut, white USV, the kind of smile that never quite reached her eyes. She introduced herself on a Tuesday morning while I was replacing a culvert pipe near the south inlet. "Just doing a friendly check-in," she said, hands clasped in front of her like she was about to pray. "We've had some concerns about shoreline safety." Concerns. I asked who had them. "The community," she said. That word again. I explained, calmly, that my shoreline wasn't community property. I showed her the survey markers, orange caps professionally set. She nodded like she understood, but her gaze kept drifting past me to the open water. Over the next month, the visits continued. Sometimes she brought a clipboard, sometimes a younger man who introduced himself as architectural compliance. They'd stand near the boundary stakes and talk in low voices, measure distances, take photos. I documented everything. Dates, times, photos of them on my side of the markers. Then came the letters. Notice of aesthetic noncompliance, safety review requirement, mandatory shoreline stabilization discussion. None of it legally binding. The HOA had no jurisdiction over my parcel. My property predates their subdivision by decades. I confirmed that with a land use attorney, twice. Linda's tone shifted gradually, less friendly, more firm. "At some point," she told me one afternoon, "you'll need to work with the community." "I already am," I said, "by following the law." That didn't satisfy her. Survey flags began disappearing. I replaced them with steel posts set 3 feet into the ground. Those stayed. Then I noticed grading equipment near the far edge of my property. Not on my side, yet, but close. Too close. One morning I walked the perimeter and found wooden stakes beyond my boundary line, spray painted with lot numbers. 35 of them. 35 future homes mapped directly onto my lake buffer zone. I stood there for a long time listening to the wind across the water, listening to frogs shift in the reeds. It wasn't a mistake. It was a bet. They believed I wouldn't fight it, that I'd settle, that I'd compromise shoreline access in the name of community integration. That was the first moment I realized this wasn't about safety. It was about expanding their view. And they were already moving dirt. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe. The trespass started quietly, bulldozers at 7:12 a.m. I know the time because my cameras recorded it. After the stakes appeared, I installed a full perimeter system, motion-triggered, cloud-backed, redundant power supply. If you work around water long enough, you'll learn to plan for outages. On a gray Thursday morning, 2 grading machines rolled past the steel markers and began clearing brush inside my buffer zone. No notice, no easement, no communication. Just movement. I didn't confront them. I called my attorney first, then the county planning office. Then I drove down and filmed from a distance. By noon, 3 acres of protected shoreline were stripped to soil. I asked the foreman for their permit. He handed me a laminated site plan. It included my land. Wrong parcel number, incorrect boundary lines, a revised survey that didn't match county records. Forged isn't a word I use lightly, but this was fabricated. Linda arrived an hour later, calm, confident. "We've resolved the discrepancy," she said. "Your deed is outdated." It wasn't. I had already pulled certified copies that morning. When I told her that, she tilted her head slightly. "You can challenge it," she said, "but construction continues." That was the moment she believed she was untouchable. What she didn't know was that I had already filed an emergency injunction. By 4:37 p.m., the county issued a temporary stop work order pending boundary verification. The machines shut down. Linda did not. Within days, she circulated a letter to homeowners claiming I was blocking community development and misrepresenting shared land. She doubled down publicly. That was a mistake. The county surveyor conducted an independent assessment. So did a state environmental inspector because the lake qualifies as protected wetlands. The results were clear. 35 planned foundations encroached between 18 and 42 feet onto my deeded buffer. Additionally, the grading had altered natural runoff patterns. I work in drainage. I know what happens when you remove vegetation along a slope. Water finds its old path, or it makes a new one. The inspectors issued citations, significant ones, fines per disturbed acre, daily penalties for non-compliance. But the real problem wasn't the fines, it was the hydrology report. The removed shoreline vegetation had been part of the flood mitigation system for the entire basin. Without it, heavy rainfall would push overflow into the newly cleared lots they had pre-sold. The injunction became permanent. Construction froze. And then the rainy season arrived 2 weeks early. I didn't do anything illegal. I didn't sabotage. I didn't retaliate. I simply declined to install artificial barriers on my property to compensate for damage they caused. The lake rose naturally after 3 consecutive storms. Water returned to the slope it had occupied for generations. By the end of the month, 14 of the cleared lots were standing in 6 inches of water. The county revoked their expanded site permit, and suddenly the HOA's authority felt very small. The meeting to address it was scheduled for the following Thursday. Public, recorded, irreversible. The clubhouse was full. Homeowners lined the walls, some angry, some confused, most holding copies of the stop work notice. Linda sat at the front table with 2 board members and a stack of binders. She looked tired. When they opened the floor, I stood. I brought 3 things: a certified deed, an independent survey overlay, and a compilation video. Timestamps, equipment crossing boundary markers, copies of the falsified site revision. No raised voice, no accusations, just documentation. The county planning director attended. So did the environmental compliance officer. When the forged survey was projected onto the screen beside the official county map, the discrepancy was undeniable. Parcel numbers mismatched, signature block unregistered, no licensed surveyor ID. The room shifted. Neighbors who had been told I was obstructing development stared at the side-by-side comparison in silence. The environmental officer detailed the runoff impact, the penalties, the restoration requirements, replanting, soil stabilization, wetland rehabilitation, paid for by the responsible entity, the HOA. Linda tried to argue administrative misunderstanding, but the timestamps were clear. So were the emails I had obtained through discovery, where she wrote, "If he won't cooperate, we proceed anyway." The board voted that night to remove her pending investigation. Within a month, formal charges were filed related to document falsification and unlawful land alteration. Insurance refused to cover intentional violations. Special assessments were issued to correct the damage, but the majority of costs were assigned to the individuals who authorized construction. Linda resigned before the civil hearing. Several homeowners approached me afterward, not to apologize exactly, but to acknowledge. "We didn't know," one of them said. That's how abuse works. It hides behind paperwork and confident language. Restoration began in early spring. Native grasses were replanted, erosion barriers installed, properly this time. The lake settled back into its rhythm. Water always does. I didn't win by shouting or by striking back. I won because I understood the land better than they understood authority. Now when I walk the shoreline at dusk, the reeds move the way they used to. No bulldozers, no clipboards. Just wind across water. The lake is exactly where it has always been. And so am I.